April 18, 1988. Dawn breaks over the central Persian Gulf. The sea is deceptively calm, steel-blue water rolling gently beneath a pale sky, but the stillness is false. Somewhere below the surface, Iranian naval mines drift silently, and above the horizon, the most powerful navy on Earth is already moving. You are standing on the deck of the USS Wainwright, a guided missile cruiser cutting through the water at flank speed. The smell of salt mixes with fuel and hot electronics. Radar screens glow green inside the Combat Information Center. Sailors speak in clipped voices, trained calm, barely masking the tension. This is not a patrol. This is punishment. Just 4 days earlier, on April 14th, the American frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts struck an Iranian mine. The explosion tore a massive hole in her hull, nearly killing her crew. Now, Washington has decided the response will be overwhelming and visible. The operation has a name: Operation Praying Mantis. From hundreds of miles away, Soviet military observers are already watching. Moscow has advisors in the region, intelligence officers monitoring U.S. fleet movements, analysts who believe they understand American limits. What they are about to witness will shatter those assumptions. As the sun climbs higher, 3 American surface action groups converge. Aircraft carriers lurk beyond the horizon. A-6E intruder attack planes wait on the decks, engines primed. The U.S. Navy is not here to negotiate. It is here to erase Iran's naval presence in a single day. At 8 a.m., the first blow falls. 2 American destroyers and a cruiser close in on the Sasan oil platform, a rust-stained industrial tower rising out of the sea. Officially, it is a civilian installation. Unofficially, U.S. intelligence has confirmed it is being used as an Iranian military command and surveillance post. Over loudspeakers, a final warning is issued. Iranian personnel begin scrambling. Some flee by boat, others stay. Naval gunfire erupts. 5-inch shells slam into the platform. Metal screams. Fire blooms into the sky like a signal flare. U.S. Marines board what remains, plant demolition charges, and withdraw. Minutes later, the platform collapses in a thunderous explosion. Soviet observers take note. This is not symbolic force. This is methodical destruction. Across the Gulf, the Siri platform meets the same fate. Iranian communications go dark. Radar coverage collapses. The Iranian Navy is now blind. And then the response comes. Iranian fast attack craft, Boghammer speedboats, armed with rockets and heavy machine guns, race out from coastal bases. They fan across the water like insects, moving fast, low, and aggressive. Their mission is harassment: hit oil tankers, attack escorts, create chaos. But chaos is exactly what the U.S. Navy has prepared for. From the carrier Enterprise, A-6E intruders roar into the air. They fly low, hugging the waves, guided by radar and targeting data fed in real time. When they strike, it is precise and devastating. Bombs hit Iranian boats directly. Others are shredded by cannon fire. Survivors scatter, burning wreckage marking their path. For Soviet analysts watching the situation unfold, something becomes disturbingly clear. The Americans are not improvising. Every Iranian move is anticipated. Every counter is immediate. Then comes the moment that changes everything. The Iranian missile boat Joshan, a French-built Kaman-class fast attack craft, charges toward the U.S. surface group. Her captain issues a radio challenge, defiant, almost theatrical, and then does something unthinkable. He fires a harpoon missile. Inside the U.S. formation, alarms scream. Radar operators track the incoming missile. Countermeasures deploy. The harpoon misses. The American response is instantaneous. The USS Wainwright and USS Simpson lock on. Standard SM-1 surface-to-air missiles streak from their launchers, slamming into Joshan. Explosions tear through her superstructure. A final burst of naval gunfire finishes the job. The Joshan burns, dead in the water. For Soviet naval officers observing from afar, this is a nightmare scenario. A modern missile boat, one they themselves would have once trusted, has been destroyed in minutes without ever seriously threatening its target. And the battle is only beginning. Far to the north, the Iranian frigate Sahand gets underway. She is older, British-built, but still armed with surface-to-air missiles and anti-ship weapons. Her crew knows the odds. They sail anyway. As she clears port, American aircraft are already tracking her. At 12:30 p.m., A-6E intruders roll in. Bombs hit the Sahand amidships. Harpoon missiles follow. Fires rage out of control. Her ammunition detonates internally. Within hours, she sinks beneath the Gulf, her mast a last thing visible above the waves. Soviet observers fall silent. By mid-afternoon, another Iranian frigate, the Sabalon, attempts to escape. It launches a missile blindly, hoping to strike something, anything. Instead, an American laser-guided bomb punches through her deck and explodes deep inside her hull. She is left crippled, burning, drifting. And still, the clock keeps ticking. 8 hours have not yet passed. Aboard Soviet intelligence vessels and listening posts across the region, analysts scramble. Radios crackle with hurried Russian. What they are witnessing defies pre-war modeling. An entire naval force is being dismantled piece by piece, not over weeks, not over days, but within a single operational window. On the bridge of the USS Enterprise, air operations continue without pause. Flight deck crews move like machines, sweat-soaked jerseys signaling with glowing batons as aircraft launch and recover in relentless rhythm. Every sortie is fed by real-time intelligence. Every strike is deliberate. The Americans are not chasing targets, they are closing a net. Iranian commanders attempt to regroup. Surviving fast attack craft scattered toward the coastline, hugging shallow waters where they hope U.S. cruisers cannot safely follow. Oil platforms burn in the distance, no longer transmitting. Orders are delayed, garbled, or never arrive. Then comes the order Tehran never expected to issue: withdraw surviving units. But withdrawal requires coordination, and coordination requires communications the Iranian Navy no longer has. At approximately 3 p.m., U.S. reconnaissance reports renewed Boghammer activity near neutral shipping lanes. These boats, lightly armored but fast, race toward tankers flying foreign flags. Their goal is political damage, drag neutral nations into the crisis. They never get the chance. U.S. Navy helicopters, SH-60 Seahawks, sweep in low and fast. Door gunners open fire. Rockets slam into speedboats, flipping them like toys. Survivors abandon their vessels, clinging to wreckage as the helicopters circle above, weapons trained but silent. This is not rage, it is control. Soviet naval doctrine has long emphasized massed missile strikes, saturation attacks meant to overwhelm defenses. What they are witnessing instead is something far more unsettling: total battle space dominance, air, surface, and electronic warfare fused into a single seamless system. By late afternoon, Iranian naval headquarters can no longer determine how many ships remain operational. Reports conflict. Some units report contact with American forces that never appear. Others report attacks that happened hours earlier. The fog of war has become a weapon. Then, just before sunset, word reaches U.S. commanders that the damaged frigate Sabalon is still afloat, limping but not sinking. She is burning,
her crew fighting fires manually, refusing to abandon ship. A decision is made. Another strike aircraft lines up. Targeting pods lock on, but before the weapon is released, higher command intervenes. The message is brief and final. Enough. The point has been made. The aircraft pulls away. Sabalan survives, but only as a message. Iran's navy has been neutralized. Further destruction would serve no strategic purpose. At 6:30 p.m. local time, American commanders signal the end of offensive operations. 8 hours have passed since the first shots were fired. In that time, Iran has lost 2 oil platforms used for military command, 1 missile boat destroyed, 1 frigate sunk, 1 frigate crippled, dozens of fast attack craft annihilated. American losses, none. For Soviet observers, the implications are chilling. This was not a fleet engagement in the traditional sense. There was no decisive duel, no grand exchange of broadsides. Instead, the Iranian Navy was dissected, its sensors blinded, its shooters isolated, its decision-makers overwhelmed before they could react. In Moscow, analysts begin drafting urgent assessments. The U.S. Navy, they conclude, has mastered something the Soviet fleet has only theorized: the ability to compress detection, decision, and destruction into a single unstoppable cycle. What terrifies them most is not the firepower, it is the speed. By the time Iran understood it was under full-scale attack, its navy was already broken. As night falls over the Gulf, burning wrecks cast flickering orange light across the water. Sailors aboard U.S. ships finally exhale, tension bleeding away. The radios grow quiet. But thousands of miles away, in Soviet briefing rooms, the silence is far heavier. Because the question is no longer whether the U.S. Navy can destroy a regional fleet. The question is how long any fleet could survive it.
Inside a Soviet Naval Intelligence Center, fluorescent lights hum above long tables littered with maps of the Gulf. Red grease pencil markings show Iranian positions, now crossed out, circled, erased. Officers stare at the charts in silence, struggling to reconcile doctrine with reality. Rear Admiral Viktor Mikhailovich Sidorov, a veteran of Cold War fleet planning, breaks the silence. His voice is low, controlled, but tight. 8 hours, he says. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Soviet observers had been embedded throughout the region, some officially as military advisors, others operating under diplomatic or commercial cover. Signals intelligence units had tracked U.S. naval traffic for days. On paper, Iran's navy was small but not insignificant. Missile boats, frigates, layered coastal defenses. Enough, Moscow believed, to impose caution on any attacker. What the Americans demonstrated instead was something far worse. They never gave Iran the chance to fight on its own terms. U.S. commanders did not seek a decisive engagement. They dismantled Iran's naval ability to function. Sensors first, communications second, shooters last. Every step executed with clockwork precision. After-action analysts begin reconstructing the timeline. They notice something deeply unsettling. In multiple engagements, American forces reacted faster than Iranian commanders could even report contact. Missiles were launched, countered, and answered before Iranian command understood what had happened. This violates a core assumption of Soviet naval doctrine, that missile warfare favors the defender, that saturation and mass can overwhelm even advanced systems. But the Americans never allowed saturation. They struck beyond visual range, beyond radar range, sometimes beyond what Iranian crews believed was possible.
Air power, surface combatants, and electronic warfare acted as a single organism. One Soviet intelligence officer writes a note in the margin of his report. They are not fighting ships, they are fighting systems. The implications extend far beyond Iran. If the U.S. Navy can do this in the confined waters of the Persian Gulf, narrow sea lanes, shallow depths, cluttered radar environments, what would happen in the Norwegian Sea, the Baltic, the Pacific? Questions pile up faster than answers. At Soviet Naval Headquarters, a classified briefing is assembled for the General Staff. Slides show grainy satellite images of burning platforms, sinking ships, American carrier decks packed with aircraft. The final slide lists the duration of the operation in bold red text. Total time, approximate 8 hours. A general in the back of the room mutters something barely audible. In 8 hours, we would still be issuing orders. What horrifies Soviet planners most is not the hardware. They know the Americans have good ships, good planes, good missiles. That was never in doubt. What shocks them is the integration. American captains did not wait for permission. Pilots did not search for targets. Decisions flowed downward instantly, guided by shared data and clear intent. The U.S. Navy behaved less like a hierarchy and more like a neural network. Meanwhile, Iran's Navy, structured rigidly, dependent on centralized command, collapsed the moment its communication nodes were destroyed. This realization forces an uncomfortable comparison. In a high-intensity conflict with NATO, Soviet fleets would face the same problem. Their doctrine assumes time to mass forces, time to coordinate missile salvos, time to recover from initial strikes. Operation Praying Mantis allowed no time at all. As midnight approaches in Moscow, draft conclusions circulate quietly, stamped with the highest secrecy classifications. They do not call the operation a skirmish or a limited action. They label it a demonstration of strategic intent. The United States, the report concludes, has shown it can escalate decisively, dominate completely, and then stop on its own terms. That final detail unsettles them most. Power is frightening. Control is worse.
On board the USS Simpson, sailors move with a strange mixture of exhaustion and pride. Maintenance crews inspect weapons systems, patch minor damage, and account for every round fired. Engineers check engines, while air crews log every sortie, noting precise coordinates, altitude, and ordnance expended. The operation is over, but the meticulousness continues. Meanwhile, Iranian survivors cling to life on makeshift rafts or are picked up by neutral vessels. Accounts later describe confusion, chaos, and disbelief. Many sailors report hearing the distant thunder of naval gunfire and explosions, unable to comprehend the speed and precision of their defeat. For a navy that had trained rigorously but rarely tested itself in combat, the experience was devastating. From a strategic perspective, the United States has achieved more than just tactical victories. With the destruction of the Iranian Navy's surface fleet and the neutralization of command platforms, the Gulf is now effectively under U.S. control. Shipping lanes are open, mines can be cleared without interference. Oil exports, long under threat, are now secured. Soviet observers continue their silent watch. For them, the implications extend far beyond Iran's borders. They note the integration of electronic warfare, precision targeting, and rapid command and control, the hallmarks of what they will later call a network-centric warfare model. For decades, the Soviet Navy had assumed superiority in numbers and missile saturation tactics, particularly in confined waters. Praying Mantis has proven that quality, coordination,
and information dominance can outweigh sheer volume. In Tehran, the psychological shock ripples through the military establishment. Fleet officers face scrutiny, their failure amplified by the swiftness of the defeat. Political leaders are confronted with the harsh reality that even a regional power cannot challenge U.S. naval supremacy without suffering near-total destruction. Lessons are drawn, strategies reconsidered, but the humiliation lingers. Analysts later describe the operation as a textbook in modern naval warfare. 1. Intelligence-driven targeting. Each strike is precise, informed by satellite imagery, human intelligence, and electronic surveillance. 2. Overwhelming force at key points. Instead of spreading resources thin, the U.S. concentrated on critical targets first. 3. Air-sea integration. Aircraft and surface vessels act as a single coordinated force, capable of rapid response and adaptation. 4. Psychological domination. By neutralizing command and control nodes, the Iranian Navy's ability to react collapses before a conventional engagement occurs. For the Soviet Union, these lessons are both sobering and urgent. Fleet exercises are reevaluated, communications protocols are rewritten, the concept of time to respond is reconsidered in light of how quickly a technologically superior opponent can destroy a fleet. In Washington, meanwhile, the operation is hailed as a triumph, a demonstration of resolve, capability, and precision. U.S. naval commanders quietly note that their actions sent a broader message. Any nation challenging freedom of navigation in the Gulf risks rapid and overwhelming retaliation. Across the globe, military planners study footage and reports. From the Caribbean to the South China Sea, the lesson is the same. Modern naval warfare is no longer just about guns or missiles. It is about systems, coordination, and speed. By evening, the Gulf's waters appeared deceptively calm once more, but beneath the surface, history has been reshaped. The Iranian Navy, once a regional contender, is shattered. Soviet observers, still stunned, know one undeniable truth: the era of conventional fleet dominance has changed forever.
Soviet planners, once confident in their doctrines of numerical superiority and layered missile defense, face a brutal revelation. The American Navy has demonstrated that technology, integration, and rapid decision-making can render traditional fleet tactics obsolete. In the quiet rooms of the General Staff, reports describe the Gulf battle as nothing less than a warning. Any fleet caught unprepared in the face of a networked, integrated force is vulnerable to annihilation. Across the Persian Gulf, Iran begins a frantic reassessment of its naval capabilities. Doctrines are rewritten, old Soviet-supplied missile boats are retired, and training exercises focus on survivability rather than offensive action. Yet the psychological scars remain. Officers recount the sight of entire fleets disappearing under coordinated strikes, the deafening roar of missiles, and the eerie silence that follows after command and control nodes are destroyed. Survivors remember the precision with which U.S. forces executed each move, a reminder that in modern naval warfare, hesitation is deadly. Meanwhile, Washington uses Operation Praying Mantis as a blueprint for modern naval engagement. Commanders highlight several critical takeaways. 1. Speed and initiative. Quick, decisive action disrupts the enemy's decision cycle, leaving them unable to respond effectively. 2. Information superiority. Real-time intelligence feeds enable commanders to act faster than the enemy can react. 3. Integrated forces. Air, surface, and electronic assets function as one cohesive network, capable of neutralizing threats almost instantaneously. 4. Psychological impact.
Demonstrating overwhelming force can prevent escalation by instilling caution in adversaries. Soviet naval theorists pore over every detail of the operation. They calculate missile trajectories, analyze ship vulnerabilities, and assess the role of air power in shaping outcomes. But above all, they confront a sobering truth. The speed of decision-making, not just the size of the fleet, determines victory. In the wider strategic landscape, Operation Praying Mantis sends a clear signal to every regional power. American naval supremacy is not merely a matter of ships and weapons. It is a matter of coordination, technology, and the ability to act decisively. Political leaders take note. Middle Eastern governments reconsider their maritime strategies. NATO allies study U.S. tactics for lessons in joint operations. Even decades later, military academies around the world teach the operation as a case study in modern naval warfare. Cadets examine the 8-hour campaign with a mixture of awe and fear. How could an entire fleet be neutralized so quickly, with virtually no losses to the attacker? How could a small regional navy be rendered powerless in a single day? For the Soviet observers who watched in silence that April day, the lessons are personal. They had witnessed their assumptions about naval combat shattered. They had seen firsthand the consequences of relying on rigid hierarchy and slow decision cycles. In that moment, they understood something profound. Future conflicts would no longer be fought on numbers alone, but on speed, integration, and intelligence superiority. Operation Praying Mantis did more than destroy ships. It reshaped naval thinking, redefined the limits of technological warfare, and left an indelible mark on the strategic calculations of powers worldwide. The Gulf may have returned to a fragile calm, but the echo of those 8 hours would resonate across oceans, fleets, and generations.
On the decks of the USS Wainwright and USS Simpson, sailors worked tirelessly under the sun, sweat stinging their eyes, ears ringing from constant cannon fire and missile launches. Despite rigorous training, the tension was palpable. Every radar ping, every sonar blip could signal a threat. Yet, even amid the chaos, professionalism and discipline prevailed. Pilots of A-6 intruders described the surreal experience of flying low over oil platforms, navigating mine-infested waters, and striking targets in rapid succession. Each sortie executed with precision that would later become the benchmark for integrated naval air operations. Meanwhile, Iranian sailors faced unimaginable. Fast attack craft crews, trained to rely on speed and agility, were suddenly exposed to overwhelming firepower. Missile attacks struck without warning. Gunfire tore through vessels designed for quick strikes. Orders were delayed or never received. Fear and confusion gripped crews as one by one their vessels were destroyed or crippled. The psychological trauma of watching comrades vanish in seconds was compounded by helplessness. There was no way to fight back effectively against such a coordinated and technologically superior opponent. Survivors later recounted the eerie calm after the attacks, when the Gulf waters were littered with wreckage, fires still burning, and the distant hum of American ships maintaining dominance. Some spoke of the shock of realizing their navy, their training, their pride, their purpose had been neutralized in mere hours. Others described a grim respect for the American forces, whose precision, speed, and integration had been terrifyingly effective. For U.S. sailors and pilots, there was also a sobering awareness of the stakes. Each strike was measured, calculated, yet every action carried weight. The potential for civilian casualties, escalation, or operational error was ever present.
The 8-hour campaign demanded not just skill, but composure, courage, and coordination. Crew members knew they were part of something unprecedented, a demonstration of what modern naval power could achieve when every element worked in harmony. Soviet observers analyzing the human dimension were equally affected. Technical superiority alone could not account for the operation's success. The discipline, initiative, and decision-making of individual sailors and pilots had amplified the effectiveness of the U.S. Navy's integrated systems. The human element, trained, coordinated, and decisive, had turned strategy into action, and action into a crushing, undeniable reality. This fusion of technology and human skill sent a clear message to the world. In modern naval warfare, ships, missiles, and radar are only as effective as the people wielding them. Strategy without discipline, doctrine without execution, or technology without courage could never achieve what Operation Praying Mantis had accomplished. In the aftermath, both sides faced reckoning. For Iran, rebuilding meant more than ships. It required restoring morale, training, and confidence that had been shattered. For the United States, the operation reinforced lessons in integration, command autonomy, and the crucial role of human judgment in high-tempo operations. And for the Soviet Union, observing from afar, the human factor, combined with systems integration, became a central concern in planning for any future conflict. 8 hours had destroyed a fleet, but in doing so, they had also revealed the true cost of warfare, the courage, fear, and human resilience that defines it.
For the Soviet Union, the operation was particularly alarming. Praying Mantis demonstrated that traditional doctrines, reliant on massed missile attacks and hierarchical command structures, could be rendered obsolete in hours. Naval theorists scrambled to update models, simulate countermeasures, and assess the vulnerabilities of their own fleets. The question was urgent. How could a fleet withstand an adversary capable of compressing detection, decision, and destruction into a single, relentless cycle? Across NATO allies, the operation became a practical lesson in network-centric warfare. Commanders highlighted the effectiveness of real-time intelligence, combined arms coordination, and rapid strike capabilities. Training programs evolved to emphasize joint operations between air and naval units, electronic warfare proficiency, and decision-making autonomy at the tactical level. Fleet exercises were redesigned to simulate similar high-intensity, short-duration engagements, preparing sailors and pilots for scenarios where hesitation could mean annihilation. In the Middle East, the strategic implications were stark. Iran was forced to rethink not only its navy, but its broader defense posture. Reliance on static platforms and small missile boats became a liability. Coastal defense strategies were reevaluated, and the psychological impact of the loss lingered for years, shaping naval planning, procurement, and training. Neighboring states also took notice. The Persian Gulf had become a vivid demonstration that regional maritime power could be decisively countered by a technologically superior opponent. U.S. naval leadership, meanwhile, codified the lessons learned into doctrine. Operations planners emphasized precision, integration, and the human factor as essential elements of modern naval warfare. Commanders recognized that overwhelming force alone was insufficient. What mattered most was the ability to act decisively, with complete situational awareness, and exploit the enemy's vulnerabilities before they could respond. The long-term influence of Praying Mantis extended to global naval strategy. New ship designs, communication systems, and electronic warfare suites were informed by the operation's lessons.
Even as technology evolved, the principles remained the same: speed, coordination, and decisiveness. Navies worldwide realized that in modern warfare, a small, agile, and technologically integrated force could neutralize a larger but poorly coordinated opponent. For Soviet observers, the operation was more than a tactical lesson. It was a warning about the future of conflict. In confined waters, in regional crises, and potentially even in global engagements, the ability to integrate information, systems, and human decision-making would determine victory or defeat. The 8-hour campaign had rewritten expectations for what a modern Navy could accomplish. And so, Operation Praying Mantis entered the annals of military history, not merely as a story of destruction and dominance, but as a demonstration of how naval warfare had fundamentally changed, from the exchange of firepower to the orchestration of speed, intelligence, and precision.
The operation's legacy is multifaceted. Tactically, it proved that modern naval engagements could be fought and decided in hours rather than days or weeks. The integration of surface combatants, carrier-based aircraft, and real-time intelligence set a new standard, demonstrating that a technologically superior and coordinated force could annihilate an enemy fleet with minimal risk to itself. This reshaped how navies approached both planning and execution, emphasizing networked operations and decentralized decision-making. Strategically, the operation sent a message to the world. Nations learned that even regional maritime powers could face overwhelming retaliation if they challenged U.S. interests or threatened international navigation. The psychological impact extended far beyond the Gulf, influencing military planning from East Asia to the Mediterranean. Governments understood that conflict in the modern era was not measured solely by numbers of ships or missiles, but by the speed of command, the integration of assets, and the ability to project decisive power rapidly. For the Iranian Navy, Praying Mantis left lasting scars. Beyond the physical destruction of ships and platforms, the operation forced a re-evaluation of doctrine, fleet structure, and defensive priorities. Small missile boats, which once had been central to Iran's strategy, were no longer sufficient in the face of integrated U.S. forces. The lessons learned shaped decades of naval planning and procurement, with an emphasis on survivability and asymmetric tactics rather than conventional fleet confrontation. For the Soviet Union, the operation served as a wake-up call. Analysts acknowledged that their assumptions about naval superiority and missile defense were vulnerable. Exercises were overhauled, command structures reconsidered, and technological modernization accelerated. Observers realized that even the largest fleets could be rendered ineffective if information, coordination, and timing were controlled by an adversary. In essence, the Gulf had demonstrated the death of predictable naval engagements in the age of networked warfare. Culturally and historically, Operation Praying Mantis has endured as a vivid reminder of the human dimension in warfare. The courage, discipline, and rapid decision-making of American sailors and pilots were critical in translating technological superiority into decisive victory. Simultaneously, the experience of Iranian sailors underscores the devastating consequences when training, doctrine, and communications collapse under sudden and overwhelming pressure. Today, military academies across the world continue to study the operation. Cadets analyze maps, examine after-action reports, and review footage to understand how 8 hours of coordinated action can dismantle an entire fleet. The lessons remain strikingly relevant. In modern naval warfare, speed, integration, and precision outweigh sheer numbers, and human judgment remains the most critical variable.
Ultimately, the story of Operation Praying Mantis is not just about destruction, it is about transformation. It reshaped naval thinking, recalibrated strategic assumptions, and left an indelible mark on both the Persian Gulf and the broader history of maritime power. For Soviet observers, it was a moment of horror and revelation. For the United States, it was a demonstration of capability and resolve. And for the world, it was a stark reminder that modern warfare had entered a new era, one in which an entire fleet could be neutralized in a single, decisive day.